If you're a teacher, you feel this constant pressure. On one side, you've got this huge push for high test scores. But on the other, everyone's saying we need to teach kids about real-world stuff, like climate change. And the big fear has always been, well, if we spend time on that, are we going to hurt their test scores?
But what if that's just a myth? What if talking about the planet's biggest challenges doesn't just make students better people, but actually makes them better science students? That's the question we're digging into today. Is this stuff a distraction, or could it be the secret weapon we've been looking for?
So, to get to the bottom of this, researchers didn't just do a small study. They launched this massive global investigation to see if there was a real solid link between knowing about environmental issues and, well, being good at science.
And to do that, they needed some serious data. They turned to PISA. If you're not familiar, PISA is basically the gold standard for this stuff. It's this huge international test that measures how well 15-year-olds can actually apply what they've learned in science, math, and reading. It's the perfect tool for a big picture question like this one.
And when I say big picture, I mean it. The study dove into PISA data from 30 different high-performing education systems all around the world. We're talking places like Singapore, Finland, Canada, Japan. So this wasn't just about one country's school system. It was a truly global look.
So you might be asking yourself, okay, how could knowing about air pollution possibly make me better at chemistry? Well, the researchers had a theory, and it's based on a really fascinating idea about what actually motivates us to learn. Let's break it down.
The whole idea is called contemplative education, and honestly, it's pretty simple. When you make a student really truly aware of a big, urgent problem, something that feels real to them, it can light a fire under them. It gives them a reason, a motivation to learn the science they need to understand and maybe even solve that problem.
This slide shows the exact chain reaction the researchers thought might be happening. They laid out this specific pathway, kind of like a set of dominoes. It starts with teaching that builds awareness of a problem, which in turn sparks motivation, which leads to more confidence, and then, boom, that all leads to better grades.
And here's that path broken down. First, you get awareness of an issue, let's say water shortages. That sparks motivation to figure out the science behind it. That builds self-efficacy, which is just a fancy way of saying the student starts believing, hey, I can actually do this science stuff. And that belief, that confidence, is what ultimately fuels real academic achievement. It just makes sense, right?
Okay, so that's the theory. But the billion-dollar question is, does it actually hold up in the real world? What happened when they crunched the numbers from hundreds of thousands of students across all those 30 regions?
Well, the results were, wow. They were incredibly clear. The connection was there, and it was a positive one in every single one of the 30 regions they studied. Not some of them, all of them. This wasn't some fluke. It was a pattern that held up across the globe.
And this chart just lays it out perfectly. Over and over, the data showed the same thing. Students who had a higher awareness of environmental issues consistently got higher scores on their science tests. The more you knew about the planet's problems, the better you did in science class. The link was undeniable.
But wait, because the data didn't just confirm their main theory, it also uncovered something really surprising, kind of a curveball actually, about what teaching methods seem to work best, and it definitely challenges what a lot of people think about modern teaching.
And here's that twist. The study looked at two major teaching styles. On one hand, you have teacher-directed instruction, where the teacher is up front, explaining concepts. That was positively linked to higher science scores. But on the other hand, inquiry-based instruction, where students might design their own experiments, was actually linked to lower scores. Now hold on, this does not mean inquiry-based learning is bad. In fact, the study found it was great for building that environmental awareness we talked about. It just suggests that for hitting those high test scores, a little more structure and direct guidance from the teacher really seems to help. The sweet spot is probably a mix of both.
Of course, learning is complicated. It's never just one thing. The data also showed other big factors. That I can do this feeling, science self-efficacy, was a huge predictor of success. And just good old-fashioned teacher support, getting extra help, feeling like your teacher actually cares, that made a positive difference in half of the regions too.
So, let's put all the pieces together. What's the big takeaway from all of this? What does this mean for how we should be teaching science in the future?
The bottom line is this. Teaching kids about real-world environmental issues isn't a distraction. It's not a choice between being a good citizen and being a good student. This massive global study shows that it's actually a win-win. You end up with students who are more engaged with the world and who achieve more in science.
The study's author, Dr. Ahlam Lee, really nailed it with this quote. The research is basically sending a clear signal that we need to be weaving these issues right into our core science classes. It's not just a nice little add-on, it makes the whole thing better.
And that kind of leaves you with this one big, fascinating question. We always talk about climate change and environmental issues as our greatest challenge, right? But what if this study is showing us that it could also be our greatest teaching tool? The perfect way to spark that curiosity and drive that helps students truly excel in science.